Hello, and thank you for being here on Text Message. We're grateful for the opportunity we have to talk about the Bible, talk about some things that we may be able to examine in our lives and make things better. Of course, we like to start off with each program with a quote, so we're going to do that at this time. But before we do that, actually, don't forget the number that pops up on your screen throughout the program is the number here for Text Message. It's the number that you can text or call with a thought about the program, something, maybe a criticism that we could be improving on. We'd love to field questions about different subjects. We do a program here called Conversations with Chris, where we actually ask difficult questions like that. So we'd love to try to see if we can answer some of your questions, and we'd love to hear what you have to offer to make this program better and to help better fit the needs that you have. You don't have to give us your name. You never have to do that unless you just want to. We never ask you to give us out any personal information. We just ask that you'll text us and try to help us get some feedback on this program. But we're going to start right now with our quote from the book Today Is Mine by Leroy Brownlow. The purpose for starting off with a quote is so that we can look at our lives up and down and we can examine them and see what we might need to do to better ourselves as human beings. And today's quote is called Bearing Burdens. Actual burdens only keep our feet on the ground, but it is the overburden complex that bends our heads to the ground, where it is difficult to see life's possibilities. It is hard to see a star when our heads are down. We can find courage to raise up, and surprisingly, the burdens won't be as heavy as we think. Realizing that the other fellow lives with his problems, which are just as numerous and complex as ours, and if he can, we can. This will save us from self-pity, which will break anybody. Obviously, it's easy to look at life sometimes and to say, he's got such a good life. Wow, how can he have such a great life? And my life is so terrible. And yet what you may not know is he's struggling with things as well. She's struggling with things as well. We're glad that you're here today, and stick with us. We'll be right back after this. Good. We're glad that you're here once again. We've got a good program in store for you. And while we do this, I kind of want to take a moment to just talk about our program, talk about maybe some of the segments that you see on it so we can give you a little bit of a background of it. Text Message is a program that we try to compile at least 2 to 3 segments of different shows, different mini shows, if you would, that we have different speakers come on and do different things. One of those programs is called What's Up With That with Stephen Aiken, where he likes to go to an instance that happened in the world, maybe in the Bible, where something happened that was just a little off. Something happened that, well, why would they do that? What's up with that? And then he wants to go to the Bible and say, if they'd only known this, if they'd only done this, that wouldn't have happened to them. We also have a program called Pew Packers. It's spelled P-U-G-H, Packers, and that's because I have 2 friends by the name of Gerald and Jordan Pew. They love to sing. They love to look at songs and dissect them and look at them and try to get to the heart of the matter on what that song is about. So we have that as well. We also have a program called What It Means to the Teen, which originally was done by Tate Williams, and now we have different guest speakers come on, different teenage speakers come on, and they give us a short 5 to 7 minute lesson on what it means to the teen about this subject, what it means to the teen about that. And we've had some great opportunities for young men to come and give those lessons. We also have a program that I'm particularly proud of, particularly excited to be a part of, and it's called Conversations with Chris. Chris Clevenger is a preacher. He lives in the Tennessee area, and he is a very, very good speaker. He understands the Bible. He understands what it means to look at it and to understand how to study it, and he does a very good job of doing that as well. And so sometimes we get together and we have a conversation where I ask him difficult questions and he answers them. I ask him, Chris, what about this? What about that? Maybe you've seen this program. Maybe you've seen these segments that I'm talking about. But recently we added 2 more. We added The Message with Reese Britton, and we showed his episodes that he's recorded so far. We're excited to have him come back at some point and film some more. But his program is to go and talk about a certain subject and talk about what the Bible, the Message, says about that. And of course, he doesn't use the version, The Message. He uses the Bible Message. And so he tries to talk about different subjects and get to the point of what the Message says. And then the program you're about to see in just a moment is Take a Moment. And just a little bit of a background on that we've given before, but it benefits to give it again because we may have new viewers. Take a Moment was originally started by Tate Williams, who passed away from this life in 2012 of October. But Tate would sit down in his bedroom at his desk and he would film episodes of these short segments called Take a Moment. And his whole premise of this was to take a moment to think about this subject. And so obviously it's a great thing to think about taking a moment and doing that. But Tate tragically passed away from this life, and Take a Moment was kind of left in the balance. Is it just going to just stop being a program, or is someone else going to take up this program and continue to do it? Well, Tate's brother Thad was asked to continue to do this program. He's done a great job with it. He has a lot of energy. If you've watched his segments, you've seen that. He's a very talented speaker. He goes to multiple preacher training programs. One of those is Foundations, where he and I attended together for quite some time as students, and now I'm a counselor there, and he still goes as a camper. And so it's a great thing to get to spend opportunities to see him continue to grow and continue to do this and that. But today, he's going to look at a difficult subject, a subject that we've heard a lot about, but a subject that is definitely hard to cover. He's going to look at the character in the Bible named Job, and he's going to talk a little bit about Job. So right now, let's take a moment with Thad Williams.
Hi there, and welcome to Take a Moment. Grab your Bibles and turn with me to the book of Job, chapter 1. What I want us to notice about Job is that Job was a man who seemed to have it all. Look with me in Job chapter 1, beginning in verse 1. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job. And that man was perfect and upright, one who feared God and shunned evil. And there were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. And his substances also were 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, and 500 donkeys. And a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men in the east. So Job was a very rich man, and most likely very well respected. He was a man who seemed to have every earthly treasure that one could possibly want. But you see, it's not just that. You see, Job seemed to have it all spiritually as well, a man who we see had great faith in God. But what I want to notice about Job and what I want to talk about today is that Job, though he had great riches alongside great faith in God, he, like the rest of the world, he, like the rest of us, was faced with hardships. And what I find truly interesting about Job is how he handled the hardships he was faced with. Now let's go back to Job chapter 1 and continue in verses 6 and following. Beginning in verse 4. And his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one his day, and sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. And so it was, when the days of feasting had run their course, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned in their hearts and cursed God. This Job did continually. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. And Satan came also among them. And the Lord said to Satan, from where do thou come? And Satan answered the Lord and said, from going to and fro on the earth and walking back and forth on it. And the Lord said to Satan, hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him on the earth, a perfect and upright man, one who fears God and shuns evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, doth Job fear God for nothing? Hast thou not made a hedge around him and about all his household, and around everything that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his substances have increased in the land. But now put forth your hand, and touch all that he hath, and surely he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power. Only do not lay a hand on his person. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. And there was a day when his sons and his daughters were eating, drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And there came a messenger unto Job, and so the oxen were plowing, and the donkeys feeding beside them, and the Sabeans fell upon them and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, there also came another and said, The fire of God fell from heaven, and hath burned up the sheep and the servants, and consumed them, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, there also came another and said, The Chaldeans formed 3 bands, and fell upon the camels, and have carried them away, and yes, have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. While he was still speaking, there also came another and said, Thy sons and daughters were eating, drinking wine in their oldest brother's house. And behold, a great wind came from the wilderness and smote the 4 corners of the house, and it fell upon the young people, and they are dead. And I alone have escaped to tell you. Then Job arose, tore his clothes, shaved his head, and fell on the ground, and worshipped. So in Job chapter 1, we see that all of Job's treasures, all of Job's possessions, everything that Job held near and dear to his heart is gone. And I hate to tell you this, but Satan does not stop there. If you look into chapter 2, Satan again attacks Job, only this time he attacks his health. So now we look at Job. A man who at first was in horrible pain emotionally, now he's in horrible pain physically, but I want to go back. And I want to look at how Job reacts to all the things that are happening to him in his life. 2 verses in chapter 1 and 1 verse in chapter 2. Look with me at chapter 1 and verses 21 and 22. Job says, Naked I came out of my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. In all this, Job did not sin, nor charge God with wrong. Now look with me at verse 10 in chapter 2, where Job's wife said, Why do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. And Job says, You speak as one of the foolish women speaks. Shall we accept good from God and not accept adversity? In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. In all this, Job did not charge God with wrong. In all this, Job did not sin with his lips. In all this, Job never questioned why bad things were happening in his life. Why? Because Job knew that God had a reason. Job says in chapter 2, Shall we accept good from God and not adversity? Job knew bad things were going to happen. Job knew that sometimes life is going to hit us, and it's going to hit us hard. But it's up to us to choose whether we are going to get up off of our knees and keep fighting. Paul says in Philippians chapter 4 and verse 13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. See, God gives us the strength to get up off of our knees and fight back. Life is going to hit us, and it's going to hit us hard. Just look at Job. Bad things will happen in our lives, and when they do, take a moment and remember that you can fight back. Take a moment to remember that you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. I'm Thad Williams, and thank you for taking a moment with me.
Hello and welcome to Lessons from a Park Bench. I'm Michael Clark, and today we're going to talk about Jesus, far from home, focused on salvation. You know, from the very time Jesus was born, there was an understanding from God that God knew Jesus was put on the earth for one reason and one reason only, to die for our sins. Before the world was created, God knew there would come a day when the world would be so wicked and so sin-filled and sin-sick that Jesus would need to come and sacrifice His body for us so that we would have a chance to get to heaven. Imagine being a child growing up and having that knowledge that Jesus had, that He was on the earth for one purpose, and that was to die. From the very age of 12 years old, He told His parents that I'm about my Father's business. You must understand this. I'm here to do one thing, and that's my Father's will. But Jesus also came to let us know that even though He was going to die, as He told His apostles, there's hope for us to have an eternal life. In John chapter 14, verses 1 through 3, Jesus tells us that He's going to prepare a place for us and that there are many mansions. That means that there are several opportunities for all of us. All of us have the opportunity to become a Christian and to go to heaven. Jesus is going there. Verse 2, He says, there are many mansions. If it were not so, I wouldn't have told you. So Jesus has gone to prepare a place for us. And Jesus basically tells us, if you follow my will, I am the way, the truth, the life. No man comes to the Father except by me. If you do my will, you'll have a chance at eternal life. Jesus was focused on salvation so much to the point, though, that in Matthew chapter 26, verses 36 through 42, verses 36 through 42, He says a prayer. He's praying to God that it's beginning to become a very big reality to Jesus that His hour of time to die is getting very close. And Jesus says a prayer. Look at verses 36 through 42 with me. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane, and said to the disciples, sit here while I go and pray over there. And He took with Him Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, and began to be sorrowful and deeply distressed. He's realizing, he knows, it's very close. It's very close. And He says a prayer in verse 38. He says to them, my soul is exceedingly sorrowful, even to death. Stay here and watch with me. Then beginning in verse 39, it says, He went a little farther and fell on His face and prayed, saying, O my Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass away from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. But then notice verse 42, He goes back and says it again a second time. He went away and prayed, saying, O my Father, if this cup cannot pass away from me unless I drink it, your will be done. Jesus knew that there would have to be death. Jesus knew He would need to die, but He still prayed, if there's any other way, if it's possible, please let this cup pass away from me. But if it's not, let your will be done. Even though Jesus knew He was close to dying, to being mutilated, His body just torn to pieces by the scourging, and then being nailed to a tree, having a crown of thorns placed upon His head. Jesus was willing to go through all of that because He was focused on salvation. Don't let Jesus have died in vain. Let Jesus' death be something to kickstart you on the right path. Let it be something that makes you think, there's a plan for me. Jesus came to this earth and died. We are all murderers of the Son of God because we sinned. Our sin killed Jesus. Don't be someone that looks at this and thinks, oh, that's just a fairy tale, that's just a story, it's not important. It's very important. It has to do with your eternal destiny. Don't be somebody that looks at this and throws it aside. Be somebody that is ready and willing to admit that you've messed up. And be somebody that's willing to admit there's a plan that you have to follow. And follow that plan so that you can one day go to one of those mansions that Jesus has prepared for you. I want to thank you for watching Lessons from a Park Bench, and I'll see you next time. So grateful for Thad Williams and the opportunity that he has seized to take a moment and to study the Bible, and he does such a great job with it, as we mentioned. But right now we gave a little bit of a background about Chris Clevenger, but I want to talk about how Conversations with Chris came to be. Many of you might know about Polishing the Pulpit. It is a lectureship that goes on in the month of August or September, and it is just several different lecture series that are going on at the same time. I think they say that it's kind of like 12 different lectureships going on at one time during the week. And so you can just kind of choose what track you'd like to follow and go and watch these lectures and learn from these different preachers and have preacher workshops. But Chris Clevenger and I, we were at that lectureship last year, and I asked him if he could just come and get a cup of coffee with me. And I was going to eat dinner, and he had already eaten, but we sat down together and we just started talking. And we started talking about what he was doing and what I was currently doing. And I asked him if he'd be willing to come in and record with GBN, if he'd be willing to come and do some of our youth programming with us. And that became what we had a general idea for the program we have now, Conversations with Chris. We weren't completely sure what to do with it at that point, though. And I was thinking about it, and he and I talked a lot, and we both decided that we should just have a conversation. We should just sit down and just talk to each other and ask these questions, and the tension can kind of be relieved. You don't have to worry about looking at a camera constantly. We can just feed off each other's energy. Well, if you're ever around Chris Clevenger, you know it's not hard to feed off his positive and his energetic energy that he has. He's just a very active person. He's fun to be around, and I love to spend time with him. And we're going to talk today about a difficult subject, though, because that is the nature of the program that we do. We don't have easy subjects. So we're going to talk about a difficult subject today. We're going to talk about abortion. We're going to talk about Psalm 127, where children are like arrows and they are great in the sight of God. And we're going to talk about how abortion shouldn't be an avenue that is taken. And we're also going to give an example of someone who didn't take that avenue. We'll be right back after Conversations with Chris.
Wow. I never took theater before. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. 3 years. It was a nice, good experience.
It is a good experience.
Thank you. You know, there's a verse in the Bible that I feel is vastly misused sometimes. And for this, what we're going to talk about, what I want to talk to you about, we're not going to misuse it because we're going to use it for the way it was intended. But I want to think about Psalm 127, where the Bible talks about children being a heritage from the Lord, which is a great thing. And the fact that children are like arrows, and the fact that you can have a quiver full of them. And so that it's a great thing to have children being like arrows. The Bible even calls them as arrows in the hand of a mighty man, so are the children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them, so they shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gate. And that's a great way to use it as the text. Some people would like to say that means as a father, if you point your arrow straight and true, it'll always hit the mark.
That's true.
Well, an arrow is not going to always hit the mark, is it?
That's true.
Why do they have to account for the wind and things such as that? But for what I want to talk to you about, this could be good and bad. What do you do when you're pregnant? When you find out someone that you know, a friend of yours, or you find out that your wife is pregnant, how do you handle that? What if you're not ready for kids? What if it's not a place in your life that you can afford it? How do you handle it? What if you aren't married to this person and you find out that they're pregnant? How would you handle that?
Typically in society, we view pregnancy as a positive thing, particularly when it's in a marriage.
Yes.
If you have a husband and wife, they're married, they're having a baby, that is a great thing.
Yes.
Right now at Riggs, we have 2 or 3 families who all are expecting children.
That's
and
great.
So you've got the race to the first sonogram to find out the sex of the baby, and then you've got to pick out names, and then all of this. And so you get to be around the excitement of a mom and a dad who are excited about the coming baby. And so when you think about pregnancy, and when a wife tells her husband, I'm pregnant, most of the time, the response to that is, awesome, great. All right, now, but when we're talking to teens and young adults, especially those who aren't married, the words, I'm pregnant, are like the death knell, you know?
Yes.
I've been in positions as a preacher, as a youth minister, whatever, where people have come up to me and they've had to say, you know what, I'm pregnant, and they weren't married. And so when you hear those words, it's not as sweet sounding as if a wife says it to her husband, baby, I'm pregnant. So we look at those two things differently. I love the fact that you mentioned children are a heritage for the Lord, arrows in the hand of a mighty man. And that shows us not only where children eventually come from, God's the Father of spirits. He blesses us with children. Even those children that are conceived outside of marriage, they're not a burden, you know. They're a blessing. They're a blessing. And I want to say something by way of this. When you find out you're pregnant and you're not married, there are, from society's viewpoint, 3 courses of action. And number one, and this is what lots of people in society will say, you needed an abortion, right out the gate. Yeah. You're pregnant, you're not married, you're going to ruin your life, abortion. From a Christian perspective, negative. You can't do that. Because that child is made in the image of God, Genesis 1:26 and 27. To violate the personhood of that child by taking their life would be murder and violate the commands of God, period. At the moment of conception, from the time that life begins, that child is a person and is endowed by God with inalienable rights. And one of those things that we need to recognize, that even in the mother's womb, that this little bitty baby, it can't be aborted. That's murder. Excuse me, that's murder.
Yes, murder.
And so option number one from society's standpoint, abortion for a Christian is out. Well, for anyone should be out.
Yes.
But for a Christian, especially from approaching this biblically, is out. That only leaves 2. The next one is to raise the child, and the next one is adoption. When it comes down to raising a child or adoption, I want to go back to Psalm 127. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, you give direction to that child's life. Now that you're in the position of a mother and a child is in your womb and you're pregnant, it's no longer doing what's best for you. You lost. The ability to just simply say, I'm doing what's best for me. When you had sex outside of marriage and became pregnant, you lost that right. Now it's, what can I do that's best for this child? And for some people, if they're not able to rear that child in a Christian home, a financially secure Christian home, then adoption would be the best option. To give this child up to a Christian couple who can rear them in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. Maybe that's the best thing for the child. And maybe the best thing for the child would be for you to rear the child. You've got to make that decision as a mother, as a father, whatever. And now that you're pregnant outside of marriage, what's best for this child? Not what's best for me. You lost that right. What's best for this child? Maybe it's adoption. Maybe it's rearing that child. I can think of one family in the Bible, especially David. You read it in 2 Samuel, or 1 Samuel, you read it, or 2 Samuel, and you read it in Psalm 51, where David, he sins with Bathsheba. He has sex outside of marriage. And I can imagine that the conversation between David and Bathsheba went very similarly to conversations we hear today. I'm pregnant. When Bathsheba tells David, I'm pregnant, you know what David does? He tries to cover it up. He tries to kill Uriah the Hittite. He tries to make it a secret that he had sex with Bathsheba. He tries to make it a secret that she's pregnant. He tries to cover up his sin. Never, ever, ever is that the correct course of action.
Absolutely.
Abortion is viewed as a cover-up to sin. And that's just what it is. Either it's going to inconvenience me to have this child, therefore abort the baby, or I don't want anyone to know that I had sex outside of marriage, therefore abort the baby. And so abortion is just cover-up to sin. You should never, ever try to cover up the fact that you're pregnant. We don't rejoice in that, sex outside of marriage and pregnancy outside of marriage, but that child is a blessing from God. And now you've got to do the best thing you can that's right for that child.
You know, one of the friends that I have, she's in Oklahoma. She was a product of date rape and got pregnant because of it, and she's raising the child as her own. And she's a hero of mine because how difficult that has to be. But she loves that child with all the love that a mother can have for their child. I think of Tim Tebow, whose mother wanted to abort him but didn't. He went on to be one of the greatest college football quarterbacks that's ever lived, and even beat my favorite team, the Steelers, in a playoff game. So I know firsthand how good he is, but not just because of his accomplishments on the field. He's a religious man. He's not religious in the right sense for a Christian. But think of what all that life would have differently. All these babies that are aborted, there may have been a baby that would find the cure for cancer, would have been able to find things that we don't know. We've got to give these children chances because our parents gave us a chance to live. How is it that it's all right to take it away from another child? And so heroes like that girl in Oklahoma who was only about 17 or 18 when it happened, to be able to raise that child as her own, just such a great thing. Just so encouraging.
It is incredible. Got the responsibility, you know.
That's right.
And so it's a big deal. That's encouraging to hear stories like that.
I love telling them because I love that there are people out there that are doing it.
Yeah.
Just absolutely great. Absolutely. But yeah, Tim Tebow, he hired an agent for television advertising. Thank you so much for being with us today. Don't forget the number that's been on your screen is a number that you can text here, a text message. Maybe text us with a thought, a concern. We'd love to hear your feedback, and we'd love to encourage you in any way possible. Don't forget when you put your phone on the charger tonight to recharge your faith so that you have the most updated version of that possible. I know that would please God and would please yourself as well. I'm Michael Clark. We'll see you next week.
Flash selected. Screen recording.